All right, good afternoon, folks. It's 4 o'clock, so we'll get underway. I require a mover and a seconder for a resolution to convene as a committee of adjustment for November the 8th, 2023. I've got Lee and so that the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby convenes at 4
Sorry,
p.m.
Mr. Chair, did you get a seconder for that one?
I got to.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, where are we here? I'll go by first name, Greg. Moved by Lee, seconded by Greg, that the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby convene at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, November the 8th, 2023. All in favor? And carried. The Committee of Adjustment hereby convenes as a public meeting per the Planning Act. Applicants and the public can speak at the public meeting. When asked who wishes to speak to an application, please raise your hand, state your name and address, and direct all comments through me. Notice of the decisions will be sent to applicants and to the public if requested. Only the prescribed persons, as per the Planning Act, may appeal a decision or condition of approval within 20 days after the decision. I require a mover and seconder for a resolution to accept the agenda for today's meeting. Got Greg and so moved by Greg, seconded by Webb, that the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby approves the agenda for the November 8th, 2023 hearing. All in favor? And carried. And I require a mover and seconder for a resolution to accept the minutes of the previous meeting. Greg, and I'm ignoring Mr. Yock, but Greg and Lee. Moved by Greg, seconded by Lee, that the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby accepts as read and circulated the minutes of its last hearing that took place on Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. All in favor? And carried. I now ask the Committee of Adjustment for disclosure of any pecuniary interests with respect to today's applications. Does anyone have any issues to declare? None heard. So we will carry on to applications. I will ask the Secretary Treasurer, please, to introduce our first application, which is actually a continuation from an earlier date.
So the purpose of minor variance application A 2023-0025H for Radin is to construct a guest cabin requesting an increase in building height and guest cabin floor area. This application was deferred at the previous September 13th hearing and is now being brought forward for a decision. An objection to the application was received from Grant Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Does anyone in attendance wish to speak to this application?
Yes, please.
Yes, I recognize, I'm sorry, I can't see your name.
It's, through your chair, Adam Lenny, the permit guy, 35
Yes.
Covered Bridge Trail.
Yes, Adam, please go ahead.
Bracebridge, Ontario, P1L1Y1, through you, chair. Yes, we're back here today because we were deferred the last time around. I've got permission to share my screen, so I will do so at this time. Just to show an overview of the property and plantings and existing trees that were there. So before the Mr. Simpson, the neighbor, objected to the size of the bunkie. So we went back. Staff had actually liaison between the two homeowners, the neighbor and the client, to come to a resolution. So we went back and we actually showed where all the existing plantings were. We showed the proposed and all this covered tree areas were, where Mr. Simpson's bunkie is. that is in question of being potentially affected by this development. So the radins where they want to put this proposed bunkie will be approximately 90 feet southwest of the neighboring existing bunkie to Mr. Simpson. Even through the 50% mid-fall foliage, the bunkie is barely visible. Full summer growth increases his visual barrier to almost 100%. We can kind of see we've got it taped out where we had it. We've got to take down these few trees in here. But there's lots of other vegetation in here. We're also on board with the town to add more vegetation for a registered vegetation plan. More of these pictures are just to show you the foliage that is in there, to better explain and to help out. The proposed bunkie was designed as a modern timber frame with natural wood exterior and very large windows to help the structure blend into the lush wooded surroundings. The proposed 2-bedroom bunkie was designed by the owners to use as a quiet sleep space separate from their kids and growing families. The use of this quiet retreat space will stay the same, regardless of the square footage. The owners understand their neighbors' concerns. Oftentimes, larger square footage requests can equal larger gatherings and noise, but this is not the case for this proposed bunkie. The owners feel the size best suits their needs and plan to use this space with the utmost respect and consideration for their neighbors' enjoyment as they have for the past 6 years. We'd just like to thank staff for their work working between both owners to come to a resolution. We feel the added square footage is, going to be away from that neighbor when it's actually built. We can increase the setback if that helps. We have no problem with the plantings, for the registered plantings. And I'm here to have any further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Adam, any questions for Adam at this time from the committee? Len, please go ahead. Len, could you unmute, please?
It seems to me that the neighbor has not complained about the vegetation or proposed vegetation. He's complaining only about the area increase. Is that correct? In his last correspondence?
Yeah, I believe Mr. Simpson is with us. Would I please recognize Mr. Simpson to go ahead and respond?
Yes. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Grant Simpson, and I am the property owner immediately adjacent to the subject property and the proposed building. The address of my property is 77 Woodrow Rossell Road. And perhaps just to the question that was raised, if I could ask, if you could have a look at the site plan that the applicant provided. And it was in the package that was sent to me. It was in the third last page. So it's the one with the table on it with the site data. So if you have that one. So this plan was provided through the town. And when we got into a discussion about what exactly is the tree preservation all about. And looking at this plan, you can see the green areas where it says tree covered area, which I assumed were going to be the preserved areas. There's the proposed bunkie, and then there's more trees, kind of an open area, but there's trees. I think the intent was just to show the actual trees that are there. So I understood that the green area and kind of the open area all would be preserved. If you look on the plan, there's a 20-meter setback, a red line that runs just in front of the main building. And then the bunkie is at the 60-meter setback line. So I assumed or understood or thought this represented that everything would be preserved other than the building envelope of the new building and the septic bed. if you look on the data table, if you look below the data table in very small print, it says preserve existing vegetation within 20 meters of shore, subject to pruning. So I didn't understand what that meant.
If I may, through you, Chair.
Yes, Adam, if you could respond, please.
Sure. Yeah, Mr. Simpson, that is a general note that we put on all our waterfront property site plans. That is just a general bylaw within that 200 feet. This is beyond that, so it doesn't apply to that, which once we get into that vegetation, the registered vegetation plan, that would actually not be on.
Okay, thank you, Adam. So if I understand you reply, that footnote does not apply in this case, and all the vegetation will be preserved to the 60 meter and
Yes,
beyond.
yes, 100%.
Thank you.
And more added in.
Okay, Mr. Simpson, back to you.
Okay. The other question I had on it was there's reference in the, I guess, the agent's submission about a revegetation plan. And I didn't understand or don't understand if nothing is going to be removed, what needs to be revegetated?
Does planning wish to respond or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, only if committee wants to require that the property be revegetated, that is an option. The condition that staff have posed for this application is preservation of vegetation. So that is the condition that we have currently. And that is to preserve all the existing vegetation on the property. The applicant and the agent has let us know that they would be willing to revegetate areas on the property if that is committee's wish.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Simpson, does that clarify your question?
Sort of. I mean, the area is all pretty well forested right now. So I don't understand what would need to, but I guess the intention is, or what we're hearing is nothing's coming down other than the building envelope and this for the septic bed.
That is correct. And everything else will be preserved. If there is no need after our conversations this afternoon to add more vegetation, then it would probably just remain as preserving everything that is there.
Right. Right. Okay. So that's good. That addresses that. And I was answering somebody else's question. So I don't know if you want to go back to them or I can continue on.
I think, yeah, no, that's fine. Adam, did you want to respond?
Through you, Chair, just more of a follow-up. Mr. Simpson, it was just more, if we could add more vegetation in there to create a buffer, that would satisfy you. I mean, the homeowners are more than willing to do that. That's why that was added in, was more to help your side of things and get you on board with our application.
Okay, thank you. Committee questions? Okay, nothing
Mr.
more.
Chairman, I had some other comments.
Yes, go ahead, please.
When the time's right.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Simpson.
Okay, so the tree preservation was a big question, so I think that's been cleared up. On the variance request, the applicant has asked for a minor variance for height of less than 5%. And in my view, this is truly a minor variance, and I'm fine with it. I should just note for the committee's information that the previous property owner, the buildings on the site are maxed out for building size within the 200 feet or whatever it is. And they needed a committee of adjustment to do a small porch enclosure in the back, which I supported. And it was, also minor. And I could see the reason for it. So I'm fine with the the height increase. I still have a problem with the 40% increase to the building size of an accessory building. I understand the town zoning limits are intended specifically to limit the massing, intensity, and accessory buildings for shoreline properties. So the proposed 40% increase in building size, in my view, is obviously increasing the mass of the building. The 40% increase is clearly increasing the intensity of use in the property. And the 40% increase creates the potential for this building to become more than an accessory building. Now, the current owner may well just want it as a place for two people to sleep, but a future owner or a renter could well see the building as an opportunity, a larger building as an opportunity for a second residence. And that's exactly what the current zoning limits are meant to prevent. The town staff has said that the existing trees, in the report, that the existing trees mitigate these concerns. So I agree that trees might mitigate the massing, but they don't eliminate it, and they don't mitigate the other issues. And I'm right next door. If the property had no neighbors, like, that's one thing. But in this case, there is an immediate neighbor right next door. The plan you saw showed my bunkie, but also my main cottage is right next to it as well. So I would be impacted by a 40% increase in building size. In my view, it's hardly minor, and it would be contrary to the intent of the zoning regulations. So I would ask the committee to see that the town zoning regulations are respected and the proposed building maximum size be kept within the current zoning limits. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Any response from committee? Okay, let's call. Len,
Yeah,
go ahead, please.
My turn?
Yes.
In considering the mass gross square footage, or whatever you want to call it, on a property, do you take into consideration both properties or just the one property? This seems to be the only question, is this particular property, not the size of the two of them combined.
Planning.
I mean, I guess my point is the existing cottage plus this cottage, do they substantially increase the square, the coverage of the property, that the minor variance is more significant than it should be singularly?
I can provide some comments on that.
Please
So
go ahead, Madam Secretary.
the applicants are not proposing to increase or to go over their permitted lot coverage on the property. I believe they may be maxed out for the first 60 meters. However, they're proposing the guest cabin beyond the 60-meter mark from the shoreline. And Adam can comment on this further if he wishes, but they are not proposing to go over their permitted lot coverage for the property, for the entire property itself.
Yes, Adam, go ahead, please.
Yes, through you, Chair. No, we were all within the bylaws for lot coverage. Yes, we could, we could go in for a building permit based on lot coverage. And actually, we could actually, if we were to go through the current bylaw, we could actually be closer to the neighbors for that setback and closer to the water. We can move it up to that 200-foot setback line, but we choose to bring it back. We can move it further away than we actually show on our site plan. There's no constraints we can move it to the west on that end. So, I mean, if Mr. Simpson is worried about the massing, although the added square footage doesn't really change the massing in my head, but that's fine. So, I mean, we could move it over to the west a bit to increase that setback to Mr. Simpson. But right now, yes, we're within zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you, Len. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'd like to hear Mr. Simpson's response to that suggestion to move it west.
Mr. Simpson?
I think there's still the issue of the accessory building becoming big enough then to be a second residence. I'm not saying for the current applicant, but for a future owner or a renter. So I still think as an accessory building, if it's only for two people to sleep in, I think the existing size should be fine. That's my view.
Okay, thank you. Len, anything further?
No. I just would like to know what criteria, I guess, the planners use in determining that's minor.
I can comment on this. So we don't look at the numerical value that is associated with the variance, just the numerical value itself. We're looking at the overall impact of the variance on the neighboring properties, and the applicants have proposed to locate the guest cabin beyond the 60 meters, and they've also proposed to create a larger setback from the property boundary, and they are willing to locate it even further from what they've proposed on their site plan here. So staff don't look at just the numerical value that's proposed, but we look at the overall impact on the site itself and the neighboring properties.
Thank you. Len?
Well, if just I don't like to labor this point, but what kind of I guess Mr. Simpson would have a concern that this could be used commercially, perhaps, or it could create that kind of a situation. Is that a possibility or a concern?
Mr. Simpson?
Yes, I'm not concerned about a commercial use per se, but certainly for a rental use, it could be used more as a second residence, or a future owner could use it as having two. It's now big enough to be a second residence on the property.
Thank you.
If I could just add one more
Yes, go ahead, please.
comment. So guest cabins are not permitted to have a kitchen or any cooking facilities, which that would basically make it a secondary dwelling. So the kitchen or any cooking facilities would not be permitted within this guest cabin.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Anything further? Mr. Getty, please.
Thank you, Chair. Brady and Greg, currently there's from what I see on the plan, it's about a 13-meter setback from Mr. Simpson's property line. And if you've had discussions and you're able to move that building envelope farther to the west, as you mentioned, what distance can it reasonably be moved without increasing the cost to the applicant or the difficulty of building on an envelope a little further to the west?
Yes, go ahead, Adam, please.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I can share my screen if it helps everybody here too. So yeah, right now we are showing a 13.7 to a 45-foot setback. I mean, we could easily increase that another, 16 feet. We could probably slide this over to increase that setback. And just to point that the size of the building is not going to change the use is still going to be what they want to use it for, but there is no intent of this becoming a rental, whether it was, 40% more, the number you say, or not. So, I mean, if we were going, we needed this, then we wouldn't, if we go in for a permit without this, that wouldn't change that fact, is what I'm trying to say. But yes, we could increase that to, say, 60 feet, I would say comfortably without being on site, 55 or 60 feet.
Okay,
Because
thank
we've
you.
already increased it since the last meeting too, because we were at, I believe, for not having that one in front of me, it was closer to 25 feet.
Yeah, understand. So it's already being moved somewhat, and another 16 feet is potentially possible without a lot of problem. I would recognize Wib, please.
Right, and then with the added plantings for the registered planting plan, I could add in more to help with the concerns.
Okay, understand. Wib?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We're getting back to the speculation about what might be the use of the building in the future, and I think that goes beyond the scope of where we should be. So for my 2 cents, I don't think we should be trying to speculate what might happen. Obviously, if somebody's using that building as a second residence, that's against the law. So then you'd have that dealt with at that particular time. But if the use that's being proposed is something that meets the requirements of the bylaw, and the variance itself is for the size only, then I think, we're starting to get beyond where the committee should be. That's just my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Wib. Okay, we've had lots of discussion. Last call now for comments on this one. Okay, are we ready to ask for a mover and seconder for the motion to vote on this application? I would ask for a mover and seconder, please. I have Lee and Greg. That the Committee of Adjustment hereby approves variance application A 2023-0025-H Radin to construct a guest cabin, requesting variances to the following sections of zoning bylaw 2006-125. Bylaw section 4.1.4 maximum building height permitted is 4.5 meters. Proposed is 4.65 meters for variance of 0.15 meters. And section 4.1.10 C, maximum guest cabin floor area permitted is 60 square meters. We're proposing 84.22 square meters for a variance of 24.22 square meters. Subject to the following conditions, the extent of the variances will generally conform to that shown in the sketch provided in the application. The owner applies for and obtains a building permit for the guest cabin within 3 years of the date of decision of the Committee of Adjustment, and that the owners enter into an agreement with the municipality pursuant to section 45, subsection 9.1 of the Planning Act, which is to be registered on title of the subject lands and which will include provisions such as submittance of a vegetation plan prepared by a qualified professional to be approved by the Director of Planning. All in favor? And carried.
The application has been approved. You will get a letter in the next few days notifying you of the decision, and the 20-day appeal period now starts.
Thank you, folks, for attending. I will now ask the Secretary Treasurer to introduce the next application.
The purpose of minor variance application A 2023-0034H for Jones is to recognize and permit a walkout basement within the cottage that is currently under construction. The applicant is requesting an increase in maximum dwelling gross floor area. No formal correspondence was received.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here to speak to this application?
In the building envelope, that's already there.
Okay, so sorry, you're Chris Busby, okay?
Busby.
So nothing further from your side, very good. Okay, committee? Any comments, questions? Straightforward. Last call? Len, you're okay?
Yeah.
All right, then I will ask for a mover and seconder, please, to vote on this application. Wib and go with Lee. Moved by Whib, seconded by Lee. That the Committee of Adjustment hereby approves variance application A 2023-0034 H Jones to finish and recognize a walkout basement within the cottage that is currently under construction on the subject lands, and are requesting the following variance to zoning bylaw 2006-125. Bylaw section 6.3 or 6.3, table 6.3, maximum dwelling gross floor area, maximum permitted is 326.4 square meters. Proposed is 389 square meters for a variance of 62.6 square meters. Subject to the following conditions, the extent of the variance will generally conform to that shown on the sketch plan submitted in the application. And number two, that the owner revises the existing building permit to recognize the walkout and finished floor area inside the basement within 3 years of the date of decision of the Committee of Adjustment. All in favor? And carried. Thank you, Mr. Busby.
The application has been approved. You'll get a letter in the next few days notifying you the decision, and the 20-day appeal period starts now.
All right, moving on. Madam Secretary, who's next?
The purpose of minor variance application A 2023-0033H for Girasolo is to demolish the existing boathouse and reconstruct a larger 1.5-story boathouse with 2 enclosed slips, also requesting an increase in lot coverage within 60 meters of the shoreline and an increase in height to the highest main roof eave. No formal correspondence was received.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Who is here to support the application?
Hi there. My name is Jasmine Last. I work for Plan Muskoka, and our office was retained to assist with this application.
Yes.
I don't have a lot else to add. I think that the staff report summarized it accurately, and we concur with the recommendation for approval as well as the proposed conditions. Basically, our client has an existing 1.5-story boathouse that's getting a bit outdated. But unfortunately, they're about 3.5 meters short on the required shoreline frontage to reconstruct it as a 2-slip boathouse as of right. So we submitted the permission to expand application, which includes all the required relief to implement the proposed design. Basically, I'm here to hopefully answer any questions that you may have. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Committee? So I do have it's a question and a comment. So in the, there were substantial reports submitted by the agent Ann Mikulski-Nielsen, and I found that quite informative. I did have a question, however, in terms of, I guess, enforcement. So, there are conditions which are recommended to be observed during the demolishing and reconstruction of the buildings. Who is, how is that working in terms of, auditing, or is the contractor keeping written records daily of the recommendations, cleaning equipment and the things that are recommended? Like how is this controlled or enforced or inspected, basically, is my question.
Through you, Mr. Chair. That is a great question, actually. I know that essentially from the municipality's end, they've recommended that the applicant enter into an agreement that would be registered on title to make sure that those recommendations are being implemented, which I'm not sure if staff could comment on that, how they deal with the enforcement on their end. From our perspective, we aren't typically involved with the construction process, but the owner is well aware of the recommendations and intends to follow them. We will absolutely make sure that he knows that his contractor should have a copy of that report. I don't know if there's any other mechanism. I'm not certain, being not too familiar with the municipality, if site plan approval would be required in this case, or if there could be something like denoted on the building construction drawings that go through those mitigation measures. Perhaps staff might have something to comment on that.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I can just comment a little bit further on that. So within those recommendations, it does have some recommendations for the construction period. So whoever is hired to conduct the work will be subject to these recommendations as well, which will be within an agreement that's registered on title of the property. So that the contractor will be subject to these recommendations. If that answers your question.
Yeah, I understand that, but who checks on the contractor? Like who is the building department going out and looking at this, or bylaw, or who actually goes and says, yep, they're following the recommendations as you know, as was outlined?
I'd have to get further clarification on that for you. I can follow up with you afterwards to get further clarification on that.
Okay. Anyone else? Len, any questions? Yes, go ahead.
One comment, I was extremely pleased to see the precise notes that they have on how they're going to do everything. I you know, if they follow that, it certainly is exemplary. We haven't seen that in many instances that I have witnessed so far, where there's such care taken to look at the shoreline, the habitat, everything. And I can understand, Mr. Chair, your point, but once again, if they follow this, it's certainly a template for any kind of building that I would like to see on the waterfronts.
Okay, thank you, Len. Wib, go ahead, please.
Just through you, Chair, a little bit of a follow-up on that subject. I'm not sure how it's handled either, but you are correct to think that somebody should be keeping an eye on things and make sure that they are following the guidelines that are being set out. So yeah, it's a good point. It needs to be followed up on, I think.
Staff will ensure that we look into that for you and get an answer for you and some clarification on that.
Yes, Greg.
And only because of the type 2 fish habitat that's being affected by it, I think the conditions that Len mentions they were excellent, but do they need to be part of a site plan approval as part of the building process?
So it's a little bit different in this case. It'll be through a minor variance agreement, not a site plan agreement. Very similar process. It's just since it's a minor variance application, we have chosen to have it registered through a minor variance agreement. But they will be subject to all those recommendations, similar to a site plan agreement.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I'm wondering whether the recommendation, the agreement that is going to be registered on title could contain that aspect of supervision or auditing, or you know, who will enforce the conditions essentially, or check that they're being fulfilled. So I'm happy if that's the case. There is room in here, I think, to accommodate some language about that.
Are you looking to pose an amendment to the?
No, I think it could be handled in the agreement that is potentially forthcoming. So
Okay, yeah, we can definitely follow up on that.
okay, applicant or committee, last call for discussion. All right, then I will ask for a mover and seconder, please, to move this forward. Moved by Greg, seconded by, we'll take Len.
Good.
That the Committee of Adjustment hereby approves variance application A 2023-0033-H Gerasolo to demolish the existing boathouse and reconstruct a larger 1.5-story 2-slip boathouse on the subject lands. The following permissions are required. Minimum lot frontage for a boathouse. Permitted is 1-story, 2-slip boathouse, with one of the permitted slips being a boat port. Proposed is a 1.5-story, 2-slip boathouse with enclosed slips. So we're looking for permission or variance for 1.5-story, 2-slip boathouse with enclosed slips. Maximum lot coverage within 60 meters, permitted is 7%. Proposed is 10.86% for a variance of 3.86%. And maximum height to the highest main roof eave, 3.6 meters is permitted, 4.7 meters is proposed for a variance of 1.1 meters. And all this is subject to the following conditions. The extent of the variance will generally conform to that shown on the sketch plan submitted in the application. Number 2, the owner applies for and obtains the required demolition permits and building permits for the boathouse within 3 years of the date of decision of the Committee of Adjustment, and that the owner execute an agreement with the municipality pursuant to Section 45, subsection 9.1 of the Planning Act, and this agreement is to be registered on title to implement the recommendations contained in the fisheries assessment prepared by Mikulski Nielsen Associates Limited, dated August 22nd, 2023. All in favor? And carried.
Thank you, Jasmine. The application has been approved. You will get a letter in the next few days notifying you of the decision, and the 20-day appeal period starts now.
Thank you.
All right, I guess we're on to other business. Do we have any other business? We have no other business. All right. Then I will look for a mover and seconder to adjourn. We have Lee and Whip. Moved by Lee, seconded by Whip, that the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adjourn this hearing at 4:42, let's call it, p.m. on Wednesday, November the 8th, 2023. The committee will hold its next hearing at 4 p.m. Wednesday, December the 13th, 2023, or at the call of the chair, unless the Secretary Treasurer has not received complete applications for committee consideration. All in favor? And carried.